The rain had not stopped falling when I woke to the sound of my own shattering breath. In the dim haze of the hospital room, where the walls still dripped with the storm's unforgiving memory, I reached for the hand that would never reach back, my wife's, lost to the churning Atlantic that had swallowed our home whole. Hurricane Alara, they called it, a name too elegant for the beast that had clawed through Wilmington's shores, leaving me adrift in a sea of beeps and bandages, wondering if the sun had ever truly existed. Evelyn Harper. That was the name on the chart at the foot of my bed, scrawled in hurried ink by a doctor whose face blurred into the faces of all the others who came and went like ghosts. 32 years old, survivor of the flood. Widow to the woman who had promised me forever under Carolina pines. Lila. Her name echoed in my skull like thunder rolling out to sea, each syllable a fresh wave crashing against the fragile dam of my sanity. We had built our life here, in this sleepy stretch of coast where the air always carried the tang of salt and pine sap, where weekends meant lazy drives down Highway 421 to the beaches near Wrightsville, her laughter mingling with the gulls' cries. She was the artist with hands that could coax beauty from chaos, canvases splashed with the blues and golds of sunsets we chased together. I was the steady one, the high school English teacher who quoted Whitman to make her smile, who planned our garden with rows of sunflowers because they turned their faces to the light, just like she did to me. But the storm had no mercy for steady things. It came in the dead of night, August heat turning feral, winds howling like the wail of every regret I'd ever buried. We huddled in the old clapboard house my grandparents left me, the one with the wraparound porch where we danced barefoot on lazy evenings, her head on my shoulder as fireflies blinked like hesitant stars. "It'll pass, Ev," she'd whispered, her breath warm against my neck, fingers laced through mine. Storms always do. I believed her because believing in Lila was as natural as breathing, as essential as the tide's pull. The water rose first, insidious and black, seeping under doors like an uninvited shadow. Then the roar, the true beast ripping shingles from the roof, shattering windows into jagged confetti. We climbed to the attic, hearts pounding in sync, her hand squeezing mine until it ached. "I love you," I said, over the din, and she smiled that smile, the one that lit the dark corners of my world. "To the sun and back," she replied, our private vow, born from a road trip through the Smokies where we'd gotten lost and found each other instead. The last I saw of her was a flash of lightning illuminating her face, fierce and unafraid. As the surge broke through the floorboards below, she pushed me toward the ladder, toward the rescuer's boat bobbing in the chaos outside. "Go, Evelyn. Live for us." Her voice cut through the gale, sharp as sea glass. I clawed at her arms, screaming no, but the water was a living thing, cold fingers wrapping around her ankles, pulling her under. They said later it was debris, a beam from the collapsing roof, that struck her, but in my dreams it's always the sea claiming its due, her eyes locking on mine one final time, pleading, forgiving, gone. Now in this sterile room that smelled of antiseptic and despair, I traced the 4 lines snaking into my arm, a lifeline to a body that felt foreign, betrayed. The doctors murmured about concussions and hypothermia, about how I'd been pulled from the wreckage half drowned, ribs cracked like the ribs of our home, but they couldn't chart the hollow in my chest, the void where her heartbeat used to echo mine. Outside, the world was a watercolor of ruin. Palm fronds plastered to flooded streets, the historic district of Wilmington reduced to sodden relics, the Cape Fear River swollen and sullen, carrying secrets downstream to the sea. I closed my eyes, willing sleep to come, but it was a cruel tease, fragments of that night replaying like a film reel stuck in the projector. Lila's laugh turning to a gasp, the salt sting of tears mixing with river water in my lungs. The rescuer's hands, strong and impersonal, hauling me into the boat as I thrashed, reaching for the shadow that was her. "She's gone," he'd said later at the triage center, his voice flat with the exhaustion of too many losses. "I'm sorry. Sorry." A word too small for the chasm it left. The door creaked open and a nurse slipped in, her silhouette soft against the fluorescent glare. She was young, maybe late 20s, with hair pulled into a practical bun the color of wet sand, strands escaping like whispers of rebellion. Her scrubs were faded blue, stained with the day's battles, and she carried a tray of medications with the quiet efficiency of someone who had seen storms before. "Miss Harper." Her voice was gentle, laced with a northern lilt. Vermont, maybe, or Maine. Out of place in this southern drawl of a city. Time for your evening dose. How are you feeling? I turned my face to the wall, the plaster cool against my cheek. Feeling? What a quaint notion. Like I should have gone with her, I whispered, the words slipping out unbidden, raw as an open wound. She paused, the tray settling on the side table with a soft clink. I expected the platitudes that it's going to be okay, that everyone peddled like aspirin, but she said nothing at first. Instead, she drew the curtain wider, letting in the muted gray of twilight, where the clouds were fraying at the edges, hinting at stars. The storm took a lot from all of us, she said finally, her tone not pitying but shared, like she was handing me a piece of her own scarred map. But you're here. That's something the sea can't claim. I wanted to snap at her, to tell her she knew nothing of seas or claims or the particular ache of loving someone so completely that their absence carved you hollow. But her eyes met mine in the reflection of the window, clear, gray-green like the Atlantic after a calm, and there was no judgment there, only a quiet recognition, as if she'd stood on her own crumbling shore once. She was Riley Voss, I learned later, a travel nurse from Burlington, Vermont, who had answered the call when FEMA put out the plea for reinforcements. Wilmington's hospitals were overwhelmed, beds overflowing with the battered and the broken, and Riley had driven down in her battered Subaru, the one with Vermont plates and a bumper sticker reading "Choose Kindness." She'd left behind a life up north, maple-sugared mornings and snow-dusted lakes. For this, the humid limbo of recovery, where every shift was a negotiation with grief. That first night, she didn't leave when her shift ended. The power flickered, generators humming like weary beasts, and she stayed by my bed, reading aloud from a dog-eared copy of The Night Circus she'd tucked in her bag. Her voice wove through the dark, painting worlds of black and white tints and impossible magics, a fragile spell against the encroaching silence. I pretended to sleep, but her words seeped in, warm as sunlight through pine needles, stirring something long dormant, a flicker of wonder amid the wreckage. By morning, the rain had eased to a drizzle, and the world outside began its tentative resurrection. Volunteers in kayaks ferried supplies through flooded streets. Chainsaws sang hymns to fallen oaks. I watched from my window, Riley adjusting the pillows behind me with hands that smelled faintly of lavender soap, a scent that cut through the bleach like a memory of home. "Look," she said, pointing to a lone heron picking its way along the riverbank, elegant and unhurried. "Even the birds know how to keep going." I swallowed against the lump in my throat, the words forming slow like stones smoothed by tide. "How do you do it? Stay when everything's broken." She sat on the edge of the chair, folding her hands in her lap, nails short and unpainted, practical as the rest of her. "I lost my sister to a blizzard up in the Greens," she said, her gaze drifting to the heron. 4 years ago. Car slid off Blackline Road in a whiteout. I was the one who found her. The confession hung between us, simple and stark, no embellishment needed. Staying felt like the only way to honor what was left, to remind myself, and others, that the cold doesn't get the last word. Her words landed soft, not as advice, but as an offering, a bridge across the gulf of our separate sorrows. I nodded, the motion small, but it was the first voluntary one since the boat. Lila had always said grief was a house with many rooms, some dark, some lit by memory's glow. In that moment, with Riley's quiet presence filling the space, I glimpsed a doorway, faint but real. The days blurred into a rhythm of vitals checks and wound dressings, the hospital a microcosm of the city's slow mend. Power returned in fits, lights buzzing back to life like fireflies rousing from stupor. Riley's shifts overlapped with mine, her laughter a rare melody in the corridors, coaxing smiles from shell-shocked patients and overworked staff. She had a way of noticing, the way a veteran's hands trembled on his morphine drip, the way a mother clutched her child stuffed bare like a talisman, and meeting those needs with unassuming grace. For me, she brought small rebellions against the institutional pallor. A sprig of jasmine from the courtyard, its petals bruised but blooming. A playlist of Nina Simone crooning through wireless earbuds, her voice a velvet anchor in the night. "Music's like medicine," Riley said one evening, as we shared a contraband cup of vending machine coffee, bitter and communal. "It doesn't fix you, but it reminds you what full feels like. I sipped, the warmth spreading tentative fingers through my chest. Full. Lila and I had danced to Nina in our kitchen, hips swaying to Feeling Good. Her hands on my waist, guiding me through the steps of a life we thought unbreakable. The memory stung, but with Riley there it didn't drown me. Instead it surfaced buoyant like driftwood carried to shore. Discharge came on the 10th day, papers signed in triplicate, a prescription for painkillers and follow-ups I knew I'd skip. The house was gone, condemned they said, the foundation undermined by the surge, but the Red Cross had set me up in a shelter on the outskirts, a converted school gymnasium with cots and communal meals that tasted of ash. Riley drove me there in her Subaru. The radio tuned low to an indie station playing folk tunes about lost loves and found roads. The drive wound through neighborhoods in rebirth. Tarps lashed over roofs like blue sails, crews hauling debris to curbside mountains, children chasing makeshift kites in empty lots. "You don't have to stay in the gym," she said, glancing at me as we idled at a light, wipers swiping lazy arcs across the windshield. A fresh band of rain threatened, but the sky held a sliver of blue defiant. "I've got a roommate situation in town. A little apartment above a bookstore on Market Street. The couch pulls out. It's not much, but it's dry." I stared at the dashboard, the offer hanging like mist between us. Independence had always been my armor, forged in a childhood of absent fathers and mothers who loved too fiercely, too fleetingly. But armor cracks in tempests, and what was left of mine lay splintered on the attic floor. "Why?" I asked, voice barely above the engine's hum. "You don't owe me this." She shrugged, a small lift of shoulders that spoke volumes of quiet resolve. "Maybe I don't. Or maybe staying's just what I do." The light changed and she eased forward, the city unfolding before us like a map redrawn in pencil. The apartment was a nest of exposed brick and mismatched furniture, bookshelves groaning under tomes of poetry and field guides to coastal birds. Her roommate June, a wiry barista with tattoos of laurel leaves snaking up her arms, greeted us with a pot of chili simmering on the stove, the aroma a balm against the world's sharp edges. "Heard about the storm," June said, ladling portions into bowls. "Glad you're here. Riley's got a knack for collecting strays, like me back in nursing school." We ate at a scarred oak table. The rain pattering against the fire escaped like tentative applause. Conversation flowed easy, skirting the abyss. June's stories of late-night poetry slams at the bookstore below. Riley's tales of Vermont winters where snow muffled the world's noise. I contributed fragments. Lila's habit of painting murals on abandoned barns. Our dream of a bed and breakfast nestled in the pines. Laughter came unexpected, a bubble rising through silt, and for the first time, the hollow in my chest echoed less like an empty room and more like space waiting to be filled. That night on the pull-out couch with its faint scent of lavender detergent, I dreamed not of drowning, but of sunlight filtering through leaves, Lila's hand in mine as we walked a path lined with sunflowers, their heads bowed in golden reverence. Riley's voice drifted from the next room, humming a lullaby to the rain, and I woke with tears on my cheeks, not salt but fresh like dew on morning grass. The wound was still there, a scar etching deeper with each breath, but in the quiet sanctuary of that apartment, with Riley's steady presence a constant north, I began to trace its edges, learning the shape of survival. Weeks folded into one another like the wings of a heron settling on still water, each day a fragile negotiation between the pull of yesterday and the uncertain current of tomorrow. Wilmington stirred from its stupor, the Cape Fear's banks receding to reveal mud-slicked secrets. A child's bicycle half buried in silt, a family photo album swollen and splayed like a gutted fish. The city wore its scars with a southern stoicism, boarded windows giving way to fresh paint, potluck suppers in church basements where stories were swapped like heirlooms. But in the quiet hours when the humid air hung heavy with the scent of magnolia and Reconstruction dust, the losses whispered, insistent as cicadas in the live oaks. I found work at the local library, a brick bastion on Front Street that had escaped the worst of the flood, its lower shelves salvaged with dehumidifiers humming like guardian spirits. Cataloging books became my ritual, fingers trailing spines worn smooth by countless hands, sorting chaos into order. There was solace in the rhythm, in the weight of words that didn't demand response. Frost's birches bending to an unseen force, Morrison's ghosts haunting the marrow of memory. Lila would have loved it here. She who devoured novels like ripe peaches. Juice staining her chin as she read aloud in our porch swing, her voice painting pictures more vivid than any canvas. Riley's shifts at the hospital stretched long, but she always returned with tales that bridged our worlds. Mrs. Delaney's breakthrough smile after weeks of silence. The way the ER waiting room transformed into an impromptu sing-along during a blackout. People are resilient, she'd say, kicking off her sneakers at the door, toes wiggling free like roots seeking soil. Like saltmarsh grass. Bent low but never broken. Her optimism wasn't blind. It was earned, woven from the threads of her own unraveling. One evening, as autumn's first chill nipped at the river's breath, she convinced me to join her for a walk along the waterfront park, where the path had been cleared of debris, gravel crunching underfoot like whispered confessions. The sun dipped low, gilding the water in strokes of amber and rose, the kind of light that made you believe in redemption. We paused at a bench overlooking the marina, where battered boats bobbed like survivors at a reunion, their hulls patched with optimism. "Tell me about her," Riley said, not probing but inviting, her gaze on the horizon where sky met sea in a seamless blur. I hesitated, the words lodged like barnacles. Sharing Lila felt like diluting her, like scattering ashes before the wind decided their path. But Riley waited, patient as tide pools cradling secrets, and so I began. She was light, you know? Not the harsh kind, but the way it filters through Spanish moss, soft and dappled. We met at a flea market in Raleigh. Her sketching portraits for spare change, me browsing for first editions. I dropped a book of Emily Dickinson, and she caught it mid-fall, grinning like she just won a secret war. Riley listened, her profile etched against the sunset, a faint smile curving her lips as if she could see us there, young and unscarred. I spoke of our first kiss under a harvest moon, sweet with the tang of cider, of road trips to the Outer Banks, where we'd collect shells like talismans, each one a promise etched in spiral and ridge. The pain came in waves, cresting sharp, but Riley's hand found mine on the bench slats, warm and steady, an anchor without possession. "She sounds like she lit you up," she murmured when my voice faltered. And she did. "That's not gone, Evelyn. It's in the way you tell it." Tears blurred the marina lights, but I didn't pull away. In her touch there was no pity, only the echo of understanding. A shared language of loss, spoken in silences as much as words. We walked back as dusk deepened, fireflies emerging like errant stars, and for the first time, the ache in my chest felt less like a void and more like a garden gone fallow, waiting for rain. But the breakdown came unannounced, as they do, in the hush of ordinary moments. It was a Thursday in October, the air crisp with the promise of cooler winds off the Atlantic. I'd ventured to our old neighborhood, or what was left of it, driving the borrowed truck from the shelter program, its bed empty save for the ghosts I carried. The street where our house had stood was a leveled canvas, foundation poured fresh, skeletal framing rising like accusations. A backhoe idled nearby, its arm poised as if to dig deeper, unearthing what the storm had buried. I parked at the curb, the engine ticking down to silence, and stepped out, the ground soft under my boots, still yielding to the flood's memory. This was where we'd planted the sunflowers, Lila on her knees in the dirt, soil smudged on her cheeks like war paint. "For luck," she'd said, pressing seeds into the earth with reverent fingers. "So we'll always turn toward the light." They'd bloomed that summer, tall and defiant, faces golden discs tracking the sun's arc. Now the lot was barren, save for a single stubborn stalk pushing through the mud, its petals wilted but clinging. The dam broke there, in the shadow of that lone survivor. Sobs racked me, knees buckling to the damp earth, hands clawing at the soil as if I could unearth her, pull her laughing form from the grave the sea had made. "Lila," I gasped, the name a prayer, a curse, the only word left when language failed. Memories flooded unchecked. Her fingers tracing constellations on my skin in the dark, the curve of her hip against mine in sleep, the way she'd hum folk tunes while cooking grits and shrimp, her voice a thread binding us to the rhythm of days. Time dissolved, the world narrowing to the pulse of grief, until distant voices pierced the haze, workers perhaps calling out in concern. I didn't care. Let them see. Let the earth swallow me whole. It was Riley who found me somehow. June must have texted or intuition, that northern compass of hers guiding her south. Her truck pulled up with a gravel crunch, doors slamming, and then she was there, kneeling beside me, arms enveloping without question, her coat absorbing the mud and my tears. "Ev," she whispered, rocking us both, her breath steady against my temple. "I've got you. Let it out. No fixing, no fleeing, just holding fierce and unyielding." As the sun slipped below the horizon, painting the sky in bruises of purple and gold. She helped me to the truck, the drive back a blur of streetlights haloed in rain. At the apartment, June had drawn a bath, steam rising like incense, and Riley stayed close, perching on the tub's edge as I soaked, the water turning murky with the day's detritus. "Grief's a thief," she said softly, trailing fingers through the bubbles, eyes reflecting the candle's flicker. "Steals your breath, your bearings. But it doesn't take the whole map." I leaned back, the porcelain cool against my spine, exhaustion pulling at the edges. What if it does? What if this is all that's left? Mud and echoes. "Then we redraw it," she replied, simple as that, her hand finding mine beneath the water, palm upturned in quiet alliance. "Line by line with whatever light we can find." That night, sleep came heavy, dreamless, and when I woke to the scent of coffee and the murmur of morning radio, Riley was at the stove, flipping pancakes with a spatula, her hair tousled from sleep. June had left for her shift, leaving us in companionable quiet. We ate at the table, syrup pooling golden, and talked, not of loss but of small salvations, the library's upcoming poetry reading, a trail in the nearby state park where wild asters bloomed defiant against October's chill. The breakdown had hollowed me further, but in its wake something shifted. A loosening like roots unfurling after frost. Riley didn't push, but she was there. A constant horizon, teaching me the art of breathing through the aftershocks. We volunteered together at a community rebuild, hammering nails into frames under a sky vast and forgiving, her laughter ringing out when I missed the mark, sending splinters flying. "Close enough," she'd say, steadying my hand on the next swing. "It's the trying that builds." As leaves turned to crimson and gold along the riverbanks, our evenings wove new patterns. Shared bottles of local cider on the fire escape, stars pricking the velvet dark. Drives to Carolina Beach where we'd walk the pier at sunset, her shoulder brushing mine in accidental constellations. The touch lingered longer each time, innocent sparks igniting dry tinder, but neither of us named it, not yet. It was enough to feel the warmth, to let it seep into the cracks, mending what the storm had rent. Yet doubt shadowed the edges, a nor'easter brewing in my thoughts. Lila's ghost lingered in every laugh, every glance, her absence a third presence at our table. Was this betrayal, this budding tenderness? Or was it grace, the sun remembering its own shine? Riley seemed to sense it, her gray-green eyes holding mine across the steam of tea mugs, offering no demands, only the space to unravel. One crisp afternoon as we raked leaves in the courtyard below the apartment, crimson drifts swirling like confetti from a forgotten parade, she paused, forkful of foliage midair. "You know you can talk to her, right? Lila. Out loud or in your head. She's not gone from that." I leaned on my rake, the wood warm from the sun. "Doesn't it complicate things? Us." She set her rake aside, stepping closer, leaves crunching soft under her boots. "Only if we let it. Love doesn't evict the past, Ev. It builds beside it." Her words hung luminous as the low-slung sun, and when she tucked a stray auburn lock behind my ear, her fingers lingering, the world held its breath. In that touch the breakdown's echo faded, giving way to a tentative bloom. A heart bruised but beating, daring to turn toward the light once more. November arrived on wings of frost-kissed air, the Carolina coast trading its humid embrace for a clarity that sharpened every edge, the glint of frost on marsh grass, the crisp silhouette of live oaks against dawn skies. Wilmington hummed with the season's pivot, farmers' markets brimming with pumpkins and persimmons, strings of fairy lights draping the historic district like veins of warmth. The library bustled too, patrons seeking shelter and stories as temperatures dipped, their faces illuminated by table lamps that cast pools of gold on oak floors. I lost myself in the stacks, recommending Atwood to a college freshman adrift in her own tempests, or hearsed into a widow whose eyes mirrored my own quiet storms. Riley's contract with the hospital extended through the holidays, her days a tapestry of compassion and caffeine, nights claimed by our evolving ritual. We cooked together now, her Vermont roots infusing the kitchen with maple-glazed carrots and apple cider reductions, my southern soul countering with cornbread muffins studded with jalapenos, the spice a nod to Lila's fiery laugh. Meals became confessions, plates pushed aside as stories spilled. Her childhood summers on Lake Champlain, paddling canoes with her sister under star-pricked skies. My girlhood in the tobacco fields outside Raleigh, chasing lightning bugs with a neighbor girl whose freckled smile first stirred the unnamed yearnings of youth. It was during one such evening, rain tapping a staccato on the window panes like impatient fingers, that the encounter deepened into something irrevocable. June was out at an open mic, her guitar slung over her shoulder like a faithful companion, leaving the apartment to us and the flicker of a rented DVD. Carol, Riley had chosen, her voice casual but eyes alight. It's about seeing someone truly, in the midst of all the noise. We curled on the couch under a quilt pieced from her grandmother's fabrics, patches of faded denim and corduroy, each stitch a memory mended. The film unfolded, its black and white elegance a mirror to unspoken tensions. Teresa's gaze lingering on Carol's gloved hand, the quiet electricity of forbidden glances. As Rooney Mara's character navigated her awakening, I felt Riley shift beside me, her knee brushing mine, a contact both accidental and electric. The air thickened, charged like the moments before thunder, and when the credits rolled to a swell of strings, neither of us moved to turn on the light. That was raw, I said, voice low, the quilt's weight a anchor against the swirl in my chest. Riley nodded, her profile soft in the TV's afterglow. Yeah, love like that, it's not about perfection. It's about choosing every day to step into the light with someone. She turned then, gray-green eyes meeting mine, and in them I saw not just the nurse who had stayed, but the woman whose quiet strength had become my compass. The kiss happened unhurried, a natural unfolding, like petals under morning dew. Her hand cupped my cheek, thumb tracing the curve of my jaw with a tenderness that unraveled me, and I leaned in, lips meeting hers in a brush soft as sea foam. It tasted of cider and salt, tears perhaps or the ocean's echo, and for a heartbeat time suspended, the world narrowing to the warmth of her mouth, the sigh escaping her as I deepened the press. We pulled back, foreheads resting, breaths mingling in the quiet. Evelyn, she whispered, my name a caress? Is this? Yes, I breathed, the word a key turning in a long locked door. If it's yes for you. Her smile bloomed slow, radiant as dawn over the river, and she kissed me again, slower this time, hands threading through my hair with a reverence that spoke of patience earned. We didn't rush. There was no frenzy, only exploration. The curve of her neck under my lips, the way her fingers mapped the freckles across my collarbone like stars in a new constellation. Clothes stayed on, boundaries respected in the sacred space of rediscovery, but in her arms, I felt the fragments of myself reassemble, not whole yet but held. Sleep came later, tangled in sheets that smelled of her lavender and the faint earthiness of fallen leaves, her heartbeat a steady drum against my ear. Dreams wove gentle that night. Lila appearing not as specter but guide, her hand waving from a sunflower field, urging me forward with a nod of blessing. I woke to Riley's soft humming in the kitchen, sunlight slanting through blinds in bars of gold, and joined her at the counter, arms wrapping around her waist from behind, chin on her shoulder. Morning, she murmured, flipping eggs with a contented hum. Morning. The word felt new, laden with possibility, like the first green shoot after fire. Our days took on a luminous rhythm, the encounter rippling outward like light on water. We stole moments at the waterfront, her hand in mine as we strolled the boardwalk, gulls wheeling overhead in lazy spirals. Lazy Sundays in the bookstore below, her curled in an armchair with a nursing journal while I browsed romance shelves, selecting titles with covers promising second chances. June teased us gently, dubbing the apartment Love's Recovery Ward. But her eyes held genuine warmth, a quiet cheer for the healing she witnessed. Yet the path wasn't without shadows. Doubts crept in during solitary hours, when the library emptied and silence amplified the what-ifs. Was this love, or merely gratitude dressed in affection's guise. Lila's memory, once a chain, now felt like a lantern illuminating but casting long shadows. I confided in Riley one evening as we drove the winding road to Carolina Beach State Park, the truck's windows down to let in the briny breeze. "I keep waiting for the guilt to swallow me," I admitted, watching palmettos blur past. "Like loving you means letting her go." Riley's hand covered mine on the gearshift, steady as ever. "It's not letting go, Ev. It's making room. Lila gave you a world of light. I'm just here to walk in it with you." Her words landed soft but true, dislodging the knot in my throat. The park enveloped us in emerald hush, trails winding through maritime forest where pines whispered secrets to the wind. We hiked the Sugarloaf Dune, climbing the boardwalk to an overlook where the sound unfurled. Vast, indigo, unbroken. At the summit, wind tousling our hair, she pulled a thermos of hot cocoa from her pack, the steam curling like incense. "To new horizons," she toasted, clinking her mug to mine. We sat on the weathered planks, legs dangling, sharing sips and silences. Below, the inlet shimmered, egrets stalking the shallows with patient grace. "Remember the heron after the storm?" she asked, leaning into my side. This is what it was heading toward. I nodded, the vista stretching to infinity, and kissed her temple, tasting salt and sun. In that expanse the encounter crystallized, not as replacement but revelation. Love as a continuum, each chapter adding depth to the narrative of the heart. Back in the city, winter's approach brought communal fires, literal and figurative. The library hosted a Stories of Resilience night, survivors gathering under chandeliers to read essays on floods and phoenixes. I took the mic, voice trembling at first, recounting the attic's final moments, Lila's hand in mine, the sea's roar a requiem. The room held breath, then applause rippled, warm as hearthglow. Riley waited in the front row, her pride a beacon, and when I stepped down, she enveloped me in a hug that smelled of pine and promise. That night, in the apartment's glow, we danced slow, swaying to a playlist of Joan Baez and Joni Mitchell, her cheek against mine, bodies moving as one. "Thank you," I whispered into her hair. "For staying." She pulled back, eyes shimmering. "Thank you for letting me." The encounter had bridged us, but it was the quiet after, the shared glances over breakfast, the way her laughter chased my shadows, that began to heal the fractures stitch by luminous stitch. December draped Wilmington in a mantle of unexpected frost, the river's surface sheening with ice at the edges, like the world holding its breath before the solstice. Christmas lights twinkled premature along the azalea trail, defying the season's chill, while poinsettias bloomed defiant in courthouse planters, their red bracts a splash of holiday heart. The apartment thrummed with festivity, June stringing garlands of dried orange slices and cinnamon sticks, the air spiced with their citrus bite. Riley and I contributed a small tree, scavenged from a lot on College Road, its branches crooked but resilient, adorned with ornaments we'd crafted from sea glass and twine, each piece a fragment of storm-tossed beauty reclaimed. The holidays loomed as a test, a gauntlet of firsts without Lila. The empty chair at gatherings, the unwrapped gifts that echoed her absence. Memories surfaced unbidden, the year we'd strung popcorn garlands on our porch, her fingers sticky with kernels, laughing as squirrels staged midnight raids. The New Year's Eve we'd welcomed in Wilmington's riverfront, fireworks blooming over the Cape Fear like floral prayers. Grief, I learned, was not linear but tidal, ebbing to reveal sand dollars of sorrow, then surging anew. Riley navigated it with me, her presence a buoy in the undertow. She suggested we honor Lila through ritual, not relic. A bonfire on the beach at Wrightsville, where we'd scatter notes into the flames, words of gratitude scrawled on biodegradable paper. "It's understanding," she explained one evening, as we penned our missives by candlelight, the wax dripping like tears onto the table. "Seeing the pain not as enemy but teacher." My note was simple: "For the light you gave and the courage to seek more. Forgive me for blooming again." Lila's spirit felt near then, not haunting but hovering, a soft breeze through the live oaks outside. Riley's was to her sister: "I carry your song in every step. Thank you for the melody." We burned them under a waxing moon, the pyre crackling with secrets released, embers rising like fireflies to the stars. As the last ash cooled in the sand, she turned to me, face gilded by firelight, and kissed me with a depth that spoke of forgiveness earned, hers, mine, ours. Understanding bloomed in those flames, but forgiveness demanded more. The confrontation of selves long guarded. Mine came in layers, peeled back during a rare day off, when Riley suggested a drive inland to the Uhori National Forest, its ancient hardwoods a cathedral of quiet. The road climbed gentle, leaving the coast salt for the Piedmont's earth scent, leaves carpeting the path in russet and amber. We hiked a trail to a overlook, the air sharp with pine resin, our breaths visible puffs in the cold. At the crest, where the forest parted to reveal rolling hills stitched with winter's bare quilt, we sat on a fallen log, thermos of mulled wine shared between gloved hands. "I've been thinking," she said, steam curling from her mug, "about my own ghosts. After my sister, I shut down, pushed everyone away, convinced I'd break them too." I sipped, the wine's warmth spreading tentative roots. "What changed?" "You," she said simply, eyes on the valley below. "Know us. Staying with you after the storm. It reminded me that holding space isn't weakness. It's the bravest thing." Her vulnerability cracked open something in me, a fissure through which light poured. I set my mug aside, turning to face her. "Lila and I, we were young when we met. 22, all fire and no map. I held on too tight sometimes, afraid the world would steal her. And it did, but not because of me. The guilt, it's like this knot I can't untie. Forgiving myself feels like absolving the storm." Riley's hand found my knee, steadying. "The storm was force, Ev. You were love. Forgiveness isn't erasure. It's permission to grieve, to grow, to love again without apology." Her words wove through me, loosening the tangle, and I leaned into her, the forest enveloping us in hush as tears fell, hot and healing, onto her scarf. We lingered there, wrapped in each other, the wind carrying whispers of ancient trees, oaks that had weathered gales and droughts, roots entwined in silent solidarity. Driving back, the sunset painted the sky in strokes of lavender and rose, and I felt the knot give, not fully undone but slack enough to breathe. Back home, understanding deepened through shared labors. Volunteering at a holiday meal for the displaced, ladling turkey and cranberry in the gymnasium that had once been my shelter. Faces from the storm's aftermath mingled. The fisherman who'd lost his trawler, the teacher whose school library I'd helped restock. Riley moved among them like grace incarnate, her laughter drawing circles of light, while I found my voice in stories, reading passages from Their Eyes Were Watching God to Wide-Eyed Children, Janie's resilience a mirror to our own. One evening, as snow rare and fleeting dusted the fire escape, June hosted a solstice gathering, friends crowding the apartment with mulled cider and acoustic guitars. Riley pulled me into a corner, away from the strummed chords of Blackbird, her fingers tracing mine. "I've got something," she said, producing a small box wrapped in butcher paper tied with twine. Inside was a necklace, a pendant of polished abalone, iridescent as the sea at dawn, on a chain of silver links. "From a shell we found that first beach walk," she explained. "Thought it could hold both. Lila's ocean, our new tide." I fastened it around my neck, the shell cool against my skin, and pulled her close, the kiss salt-sweet with cider. "It's perfect," I whispered. "You are." Forgiveness rippled outward, touching edges I'd long ignored. I wrote to Lila's family up in Virginia, a letter inked with the truths I'd buried. The joy we'd shared, the sorrow of her leaving, the tentative steps toward dawn. Their reply came gentle, a card scented with pine. "She'd want this for you, Evelyn. Light after the dark." As Christmas neared, we decorated the tree by firelight, Riley humming carols off-key, her delight infectious. Ornaments caught the glow. A starfish from our pier walks, a tiny canvas painted with sunflowers in Lila's style, a maple leaf pressed from Riley's Vermont home. Hanging the last, I turned to her, the room aglow. "This us, it's not replacement. It's continuation." She cupped my face, thumbs brushing my cheeks. "Understood. And forgiven, every beautiful bit." In her eyes I saw the arc complete. Wound acknowledged, breakdown bridged, encounter cherished. Forgiveness wasn't a destination, but a path walked hand in hand toward the sun's remembering. January unfurled with a gentleness foreign to the coast, temperatures hovering in thaw's embrace, the river running free of ice, carrying winters refused to warmer waters. Wilmington shed its holiday finery for the spare beauty of renewal. Camellias unfurling crimson blooms in cottage gardens, the air alive with the trill of returning robins. The library pulsed with resolutions, patrons checking out self-help tomes and memoirs of mending. And I too felt the stir of rebirth, a quiet revolution blooming in the marrow. Riley and I settled into a tandem orbit, our lives interleaving like vines on a trellis. Her contract wound down, but she extended, citing the city's lingering needs and unspoken the pull between us. Mornings began with coffee on the fire escape, mugs steaming as we watched the dawn gild the steeples. Evenings ended with books read aloud, her voice lending cadence to Austen's wit or Walker's wisdom. Intimacy deepened in layers, nights spent mapping each other's contours with fingertips and whispers, bodies entwining in a dance of rediscovery, tender and unhurried, each touch a verse in the poem of us. Rebirth manifested in bold strokes. I enrolled in a community art class at the local college, channeling Lila's legacy into charcoal sketches of storm-scarred landscapes, waves frozen mid-crash, homes rising phoenix-like from rubble. Riley attended the first exhibit, her pride a quiet flame as she studied my pieces, fingers tracing the frames. "These breathe Ev," she said, voice thick. "Just like you." Inspired, she shared her own hidden craft, journaling, pages filled with pressed leaves and watercolor washes of Vermont lakes. Emotions distilled into hues of blue and gold. We collaborated on a scrapbook, pasting photos from our hikes, the heron silhouette post-storm, sunflowers nodding in a rebuilt garden, our hands laced at the dune's edge. It became a talisman, pages turned in quiet moments, reminders that rebirth was collage, not erasure. Fragments honored, rearranged into new beauty. The season brought challenges, tests of the fragile new growth. A nor'easter barreled in mid-month, winds lashing the coast with echoes of Alara's fury, rain sheeting the windows like veils of doubt. Power flickered, the apartment plunged into candlelit hush, and old fears resurfaced, mine in nightmares of attics and surging black. Riley's in the way she paced, hands twisting a dish towel, murmuring of blizzards that buried roads and hearts. We weathered it together, literally. Blankets fortified around us on the couch, a battery lantern casting wavering shadows as we shared stories to banish the howl. "Tell me about the worst storm you faced," I prompted, her head on my lap, fingers combing through her sandy waves. She exhaled, gaze on the flames dance. "Not the blizzard, that was loss. The real storm was after, when I quit nursing school for a year, convinced I couldn't save anyone. Hid in my parents' cabin, chopping wood until my hands blistered, thinking isolation was strength." Her voice softened. "But rebirth? That was driving south last summer, answering the call for hurricane relief. Meeting you, realizing staying saves me too." I bent to kiss her forehead, the salt of her skin a sacrament. "And you saved me, not from the water but from the drowning after." The storm passed by morning, skies clearing to a crystalline blue, and we ventured out to assess. Branches littering sidewalks like fallen prayers, the river churned but unyielding. In the cleanup, rebirth solidified. Neighbors banding with chainsaws and brooms, laughter punctuating the labor, a community's pulse reasserting itself. Riley and I joined, her hauling limbs while I swept debris, sweat mingling with the scent of wet earth, our glances across the yard electric with shared survival. Spring's heralds arrived early, azaleas exploding in pink profusion along the riverwalk, the air humming with pollen and promise. We planned a trip north, her invitation to Burlington a bridge across our geographies. See where I learned to love the quiet. The drive was a revelation, highways unspooling through Virginia's blue ridges, then Pennsylvania's rolling farms, the Subaru's radio crooning Springsteen anthems of working-class hearts. Vermont welcomed us with emerald valleys and sugar shacks steaming against April chill. Riley's family home was a cedar-sided haven on the lake's edge, docks creaking under early thaw. Her parents, warm, weathered folk with calloused hands from maple taps, embraced me without fanfare, setting an extra place at the table laden with venison stew and cornbread. "Heard you two make a fine team," her father said, eyes twinkling over his pipe. while her mother pressed a jar of syrup into my hands. From the trees that bent but didn't break. We kayaked the lake at dawn, paddles dipping in sink, loons calling from misty coves. This is where I scattered her ashes, Riley confided, gesturing to a point where water met shore, willows trailing fronds like morning veils. Felt like releasing her to the current. I nodded, throat tight, and shared my own ritual, the beach bonfire notes curling to smoke. In that exchange, rebirth deepened. Not solitary ascent, but mutual, roots intertwining beneath the surface. Evenings by the hearth brought stories, her sister's escapades on ice skates, my Lila's murals splashed across barn walls, and laughter genuine and freeing, chasing the last specters. Before leaving, Riley took me to the family plot. A simple stone etched with her sister's name, wildflowers nodding at its base. Forgive the delays, I whispered to the wind, to Lila, to myself. I'm learning to live wide. Back in Wilmington, the journey fueled momentum. I accepted a full-time role at the library, curating a healing narrative series, author visits and writing workshops for survivors. Riley, her contract fulfilled, took a local position at a clinic, her days now rooted in community care. We moved into a cottage on the marsh's edge, clapboard white, porch wide for dreaming. A space that echoed our first home without mimicking it. Sunflowers reseeded in the yard, courtesy of neighbors' gifts, their faces turning faithful to the sun. Rebirth crested in subtle waves. A poem published in the local paper, verses of salt and solace. Riley's watercolors exhibited at the bookstore, blues evoking both storm and serenity. Intimacy flowered 2 nights of slow unraveling, her body a landscape of soft hills and valleys, my hands learning the poetry of her sighs, the arch of her back under moonlight filtering through lace curtains. It was sacred, this union, not conquest but communion, each caress a vow renewed. Yet rebirth carried its own tempests, moments when Lila's laugh echoed too loud in a song on the radio, or Riley's hand in mine stirred a pang of what-ifs. We navigated them with honesty. Evenings on the porch swing dissecting doubts over herbal tea. You're not her shadow, she'd affirm, pulling me close. You're the sun she helped you remember. In those affirmations I rose, not unscathed but whole, the woman who had drowned in grief now swimming toward shore. Riley's hand forever laced in mine. May bloom triumphant along the Carolina coast, azaleas yielding to dogwood's bridal white, the air thick with honeysuckle's siren call. Wilmington thrummed with summer's prelude. Paddleboards dotting the river, ice cream vendors chiming through neighborhoods, the historic district alive with tourists tracing paths once walked by pirates and poets. Our cottage became a haven, windows flung wide to the marsh's symphony. Crickets chorusing at dusk, egrets stalking the tidal flats like sentinels of serenity. Sunflowers towered in the yard now, golden sentries nodding to the arc of days, their seeds a promise scattered for autumn's harvest. The light after the storm was not blinding but gradual, a diffusion through morning mist, warming the edges of what had been shadowed. Riley and I moved through it with the ease of long-married souls, though our anniversary was mere months old. A quiet vow exchanged on the beach at dawn, toes buried in cool sand, rings simple bands of abalone-inlaid silver, etched with coordinates of our first meeting, the hospital room's window overlooking the flooded Cape Fear. To the sun and beyond, we'd whispered, echoing Lila's pledge, her blessing woven into ours. Life layered on in luminous folds. The library's series flourished, workshops filling with voices once muted. A fisherman penning odes to lost nets. A mother scripting letters to her flood-orphaned dreams. I moderated with growing confidence, my own words now a published chapbook. Tides of return verses charting grief's ebb to hope's flow. Readings drew crowds, Riley in the front row always, her applause the sweetest echo. Her clinic work bloomed too, a satellite outpost offering holistic care, acupuncture alongside antibiotics, art therapy circles where patients sketch their scars. Healing's holistic, she'd say, home with paint under her nails from a group mural. Body, mind, the works. We'd collaborate evenings, her brushing color while I read drafts aloud. Our cottage a forge for communal mending. June, ever the catalyst, moved to a loft downtown, her going-away barbecue a raucous affair on our porch. Grill smoke curling skyward, guitars strumming Dylan covers, friends toasting to storms past and sisters found. She hugged me fierce at evening's end, whispering, "You too? You're the light show after the thunder." Riley and I watched her taillights fade down the lane, then turned inside, the quiet amplifying our breaths, hands finding waists in the lamplight. Intimacy remained our North Star, mornings waking entwined, her gray-green eyes opening to mine with sleepy smiles. Afternoons stolen on the marsh trail, kisses hidden in willow shade, the world a blur of green and gold. Lovemaking was poetry in motion, bodies conversing in sighs and arches, her fingers tracing the abalone pendant between my breasts, a talisman of tides turned. "I love you," she'd murmur post-climax, voice husky with truth, and I'd reply in kind, the words a current carrying us deeper. Light manifested and legacies honored. We visited Lila's mural site, a barn restored by community hands, her abstract waves now framed by fresh timber. I added a sunflower vignette in her style, Riley mixing pigments beside me, the act a bridge of forgiveness fulfilled. Her family's summer reunion in Virginia welcomed us, barbecues under dogwood canopies where toasts blended our stories, her mother's embrace sealing me as kin. Challenges lingered soft as sea mist. Anniversaries of Alara's landfall, marked with quiet beach vigils, candles flickering against the surf's murmur. Riley's occasional wanderlust, soothed by planning escapes. A weekend in the Smokies where we'd hike to waterfalls veiling granite faces, her hand in mine echoing our first walk. Doubts, when they surfaced, were met with candor. What if the next storm? I'd voice and she'd counter. Then we rebuild together, stronger joists, deeper roots. One golden June evening, as fireflies ignited the yard like living lanterns, we hosted a sunset gathering. Survivors from the library circle, platters of shrimp and grits steaming on the porch table. Stories flowed with the wine. Rebuilds completed, dreams resurrected. I raised a glass, voice steady. To the nurses who stay, not just after storms but through them. To light remembered and shared. Eyes turned to Riley, cheers rippling, her cheeks flushing as she squeezed my knee under the table. Later, as guests dispersed to cricket song, we swayed on the lawn, her cheek to mine, the air alive with phosphor glow. "This is it, isn't it?" she whispered. "The after, the beautiful, bruised now." "Yes," I breathed, spinning her gentle laughter bubbling free. "And it's ours." The light held no illusions of perfection. Shadows dappled the sun, hoar-frosted memories nipped at heels, but it warmed, insistent, inviting growth. We dreamed aloud that summer. A joint workshop blending words and watercolors, travels to coasts unnamed, a garden expanded with Lila's favorites, lavender for calm, coneflowers for resilience. As fireflies swirled, I glimpsed her, not specter but sister spirit, in the luminous dance, nodding approval from the beyond. Riley caught my gaze, understanding unspoken. "She's here," she said softly, "in the light we carry." And so we did, hand in laced hand, toward horizons vast and verdant, the sun's memory not just recalled, but lived, warm, eternal, ours.